So while people are still joining, I'll go ahead and just start the introductory remarks. And I'm very happy to see you all here. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to the fourth CRC Roundtable, a monthly virtual seminar series that we've started, about 4 months ago. For those of you that have been on before, sorry for the repetition, but for those of you that are new, our intention is to host targeted, inclusive, and informed conversation, trying to match scientific advances and management needs. The webinars are designed for contribution, not consumption. So each seminar invites a diverse range of research managers and professionals to have conversations around critical topics in order to build connectivity between all of us and increase our collective competency for decision making. As a reflection of that intent, the panelists have been given about 12 minutes each to make some introductory remarks, allowing 30 minutes for discussion. This is all about us, the participants, giving us a place to ask the clumsy and brave questions and to practice the humility necessary for building the future that we want. This roundtable follows a newsletter and the last two webinars on the topic of environmental justice, and I think represents the type of evolving conversation and learning that we really like to see at this forum. At each of these webinars, I've begun them by answering the question of why this topic at this time by these speakers. Participatory science is, I think, a fitting conclusion after identifying the unnecessary divisions between those with a voice and those without. I've always admired the field of astronomy where the significance of contributions, whether by volunteers or professionals, are viewed simply as valuable contributions, one no less than the other. For scientists, I think participatory science represents a powerful dimension of inclusivity that we can all play a role in. For policymakers, it represents an opportunity for stewardship by all and for scientific literacy. As for this time, it is a season of giving, and I think these programs represent the best of humans and ecosystems bringing out the best in each other. And as for these two speakers, the two programs they represent show us two powerful dimensions of participatory science, its potential utility as a source of data and a powerful engagement tool. Our speakers are Liz Chidoba, who's a Water Quality Monitoring Initiative Director for Alliance for the Chesapeake Bay, and Jamie Testa, who's the Project Coordinator of Chesapeake DolphinWatch. And so at this point in time, I will turn it over to Liz to get us started.
Great, thank you so much, Denise. Can you all hear me? Perfect, sounds great. Well, as Denise mentioned, I'm Liz Chidoba. I'm the Water Quality Initiative Director at the Alliance for the Chesapeake Bay, and I'm out of our Richmond, Virginia office. And I just want to say thank you so much for inviting me to participate today. And I'm really excited to talk about citizen science and the Chesapeake Monitoring Cooperative. So the Chesapeake Monitoring Cooperative, or CMC, works with diverse stakeholders to collect and share new and existing water quality and benthic macroinvertebrate data. And through this collaborative, we aim to develop a comprehensive understanding of the Chesapeake Bay watershed health. So this program started about 6 years ago through a cooperative agreement with the Chesapeake Bay program. And we're currently in year 6 of that cooperative agreement. So hopefully in the next few months, we'll be able to renew our agreement with them and keep this program running. And the CMC consists of 4 core partner organizations, and we call ourselves service providers through the CMC network. And this includes the Alliance for the Chesapeake Bay, the Isaac Walton League of America, the Alliance for Aquatic Resource Monitoring, and the University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science. And together, we collectively work with and facilitate all of the volunteer and other monitoring groups who are actually out there collecting data across the watershed. So we work based on regions where we're located and areas of expertise for chemical monitoring programs or benthic monitoring programs. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we started this program through a cooperative agreement with the Chesapeake Bay program. And the reason that we started was because the Bay program recognized that there was this wealth of data that was being collected across the watershed, but it was really patchy on how it was actually used beyond a local watershed group. And they really recognized that there was a power in harnessing this data in a more localized and centralized manner. So as you can see on this map, the Chesapeake Bay program has traditional monitoring sites, which show up in teal here on the map. And as you can see, these really focus on the bay itself and the major tributaries throughout the watershed. This is data that's collected by state and federal agencies, as well as some universities as well. In contrast, you can kind of see the purple and yellow sites are these volunteer or non-traditional partner sites. And you can see that these really focus more on the headwaters, smaller tributaries, smaller watersheds that are generally more wadeable or accessible by volunteers. So looking at this map, you can really see how there's potential when we combine these two data sets to really gain a better understanding of the entire health of the Chesapeake Bay watershed as a whole. Next slide, please. So in order to pull all of this data together, the crown jewel of the CMC is our centralized data hub, the Chesapeake Data Explorer. And this was built in partnership with VIMS and Greenfin Studios. And this is really what brings all of the data together and houses all of the data in one easily accessible place and really helps us achieve that mission of sharing data across the region. So you can see a picture here of the homepage, and this is publicly accessible. Anybody can go to this homepage. We'll throw this link into the chat box a little bit later. And so you can go and you can see this map. You can see where we have all of the data being collected across the watershed. We currently have data in all 7 bay jurisdictions, which is super exciting. And there's also a query function on this homepage as well. So you can download all of the data and use it and look at it for your own purposes. So within the Data Explorer, we have about 20 to 25 parameters that we're currently tracking, which includes chemical, physical, and biological data. So things like temperature, dissolved oxygen, pH, nutrients, bacteria, benthic, macroinvertebrate, all of that data. Really, we're not focusing anything on toxics, heavy metals, or things like that. Really, the focus is baseline trend data over time. We're actively looking to see how we can expand these parameters in the future. And as you can see, also at the bottom of the homepage, we have a few database statistics that you can see. And currently we have over 330,000 data points in the system. And as I said, that encompasses all 7 bay jurisdictions. And this covers about 545 streams and rivers at 2,000 stations from across the watershed. So this is really, again, that data portal to hold everything together and make the data publicly accessible. Next slide, please. So to back it up a little bit, the first few years of this program was really dedicated at setting the groundwork and foundation of the CMC. So in order to get all of this data into a centralized data hub and to have it be accessible and usable by a large amount of people, we have to make sure that the data is of known quality. And in order to do that, we first had to set up standard operating procedures and quality assurance project plans, which really encompass the whole breadth of what the CMC monitors and lays out those foundational pieces of what we actually need to do to collect high quality data. All of that feeds into this tiered framework. So we set up this tiered framework to really educate on the end uses of each of the data points that are in our system. So it's broken up into 3 tiers. Tier 1 is our lowest tier, and that's typically used just for educational purposes and a little bit for targeting health screening. Tier 2 moves up. We increase a little bit of our quality assurance, increase some time and rigor and expense in the equipment used. This data can be used for report cards and also to target management actions. Then we move up to Tier 3, which is currently only available for chemical tidal programs. And this data is actually equivalent to the Chesapeake Bay program and can be used to inform policy and management decisions. So typically, as you move up the tiered framework, we're increasing our quality assurance standards, we're increasing the cost of the equipment used, the time, and the rigor to run the program. And so the CMC, the 4 core partners of the CMC called service providers, provide all of the technical support to every monitoring group that's submitting data to the Data Explorer in order to meet the quality assurance for each of these designated tier levels, depending on which tier level they choose to submit their data under. So we're providing everything from study design workshops to training volunteers and coordinators to data integration workshops, and then finally data interpretation workshops. So the CMC team really facilitates the whole process and makes sure that all of the data that gets into our system is categorized into one of these tiers. Next slide, please. And so who is actually using this data? So as I mentioned, this is set up through a cooperative agreement with the Chesapeake Bay program. So they are the #1 folks using this data. I actually just uploaded, we're still working a little bit on the process to upload data to the Chesapeake Bay program, but I made a big data push just last week. So we were very excited, and hopefully we'll be able to see this integrated into their system very soon. Secondly, the state agencies are additionally our target audience. And in 2018, we had a memorandum of understanding that was unanimously signed across all 7 Bay jurisdictions at the principal staff committee level of the Chesapeake Bay program. And this is really a groundbreaking MOU that was signed, recognizing that citizen science is valuable data, recognizing that the Data Explorer is housing all of this data together in one easily accessible place, and really just acknowledging all of the hard work that the CMC puts into this program in order to ensure that that data is high quality. And then lastly, this year, we were very honored to work with Booz Allen Hamilton to host a virtual hackathon. And this looked at 4 questions regarding Chesapeake Bay health throughout the watershed, and was really an awesome opportunity. It was a month-long virtual hackathon, and it was really an awesome opportunity for the first time, we were able to look at this entire data set in the Data Explorer as a whole. Again, instead of individual groups using their data in little silos, this is the first time we were really able to analyze and use this data collectively as a whole to see if we could answer questions about the Chesapeake Bay watershed health. And it was used in conjunction with the Bay program data to really see where the enhanced knowledge lies. So this is a really awesome experience. We had 10 submissions from the hackathon, and I'll post a link to our website where you can see the videos for all of the submissions. And it's something that we really hope to continue working on down the line and really see this as a powerful tool to really analyze the data that we're collecting. Next slide, please. And then last but not least, I'll wrap it up with our volunteer engagement piece. So we couldn't do any of this work without our amazing thousands and thousands of volunteers who are out there monthly, weekly, yearly, just collecting data and really being hands-on in the field, connecting with their environment. all of our volunteers, we get so many stories from our volunteers of just loving to go out to their site, seeing changes in their site over month by month or year by year, seeing different animals that are there or different changes in the stream bank. So really these volunteers are the eyes and ears on the ground to really see changes over time, as well as collecting this valuable data. And we've also seen an increase in science literacy and stewardship. So through the CMC, we've now had a few programs that have been able to start a program, so engage in some way in citizen science with zero scientific background, go through the necessary training, start collecting data, and then additionally go through a data interpretation workshop. So now they're able to produce products and actually tell a story about what's going on in their watershed and connect back to their constituents and residents in their watershed and really become the champions of protecting that waterway. So it's been really amazing to kind of see these groups from start to finish really come full circle. And the CMC provides all of the tools and resources to make that happen. And lastly, we can't be in 2020 without acknowledging the pandemic that hit and how that has affected everything that we do. So the volunteer engagement piece for us, all of the trainings that we do are very hands-on, interactive, and engaging. And 2020 has thrown a wrench in all of our processes. And we've had to switch from our very in-person trainings to virtual trainings. So luckily, we have made significant progress. We have been able to continue our network of existing monitors. We just haven't been able to onboard as many new monitors this year as we have in a typical year because we still need that in-person, hands-on experience to make sure that they're really understanding the methods and collecting the data to the quality that we need. So that's our big focus in 2021 is trying to get back to in-person engagement. So thank you, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thanks a lot, Liz. That was great. We will hold questions for the speakers until both are through, and I'm keeping, if you have a question about a specific presentation, for example, there's some from Meredith for Liz, I'll ask them, you can type it in the chat box and I'll make sure it gets aired at the discussion section, so thank you. So we'll move on to Jamie. You're muted, Jamie.
Okay, can everyone see that? All right, welcome. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm here on behalf of Dr. Helen Bailey, who wanted to be here but wasn't able to make it. My name is Jamie Testa, and let's jump into DolphinWatch. So we started the project when members of Dr. Bailey's team were testing gear in preparation for offshore work, offshore in the wind energy area of Maryland, where they had a study site. And so you can see in the center photo, one of our sea pods, that's a click detection device, just being thrown in the water off of our research pier at Chesapeake Biological Lab, where we work. And they were testing devices in 2015 and 2016 and detected dolphins both summers. So in addition to a lot of questions in Dr. Bailey's direction about marine mammals and dolphins in Chesapeake Bay, they decided to go ahead and start to answer some of those questions about where dolphins are, when they're here, and where do they go in specific locations. So this was a perfect opportunity for us to enlist citizen scientists, because how else do you cover the entire Chesapeake Bay with visual observations for a small team? So we launched the app as a web-based online presence in June of 2017, and that was courtesy of startup funds from both the Chesapeake Bay Trust and our lab, CBL. And users started signing up immediately. They actually started entering dolphin sightings before we did any press and put our presence out into the world. So this is a map preview. A mobile version launched in 2018. We have over 7,300 users at this time. And we've just completed we're about to complete our 4th dolphin season, we call it. So big interest. The site umcs.edu/dolphinwatch is a page where you can get more information about our project if you're interested. When users come to our site and are interested in becoming citizen scientists, it's very easy. All we require is an email and a password. So we don't collect very much information about who we're reaching through our citizen scientists. And this was pretty intentional. We wanted anyone to be able to join, whether they own a waterfront home and they see dolphins all the time, or whether they're just tourists in the Bay Area who happen to see dolphins and can contribute in their own way, potentially irregularly. So we can tease out a little bit more information on our users from Google Analytics, but it's not much. But it is important that we have some information. Can't be completely anonymous, because we do email with the users if we have a question about their sighting data or an issue comes up, such as they accidentally plotted one on land. When our users register, they get an automatic banner, particularly with responsible marine wildlife viewing guidelines, the numbers to call if you see a stranded marine mammal, because we do not respond to stranded, injured, or dead animals. And so this is a little aspect of our education effort there. Once a user logs in, they can browse the map to see other reported sightings. So we recognize that some people who are registered users are more curious and actually seeing dolphins themselves. All they have to do is kind of move around the map to find where they saw a dolphin. They click on the map and a reporting box pops up. Sometimes GPS can be a little spotty depending on cell phone coverage or Wi-Fi signal, especially if you're back on land entering it. So sometimes you have to move around the map a bit. But once you click on the map and the reporting box pops up, the app automatically populates the date, time, and lat long. So the user has to select a group size. It's an estimate from bins. They can slide the bar over pretty round estimates. So 5 to 10, 10 to 50, 50 to 100, or more than 100 dolphins. And then they can save the sighting, but we always request, as part of our data controls, to give us that known quality in our data, we do require that each sighting contains a description or an image. This is pretty easy given our technology advances. If you're using a mobile app to submit a dolphin sighting, you usually have your camera out. So we do get a fair number of images submitted, which is really helpful. And this helps us build our data integrity and give us confidence in our data. This is just a little side note. Our map, when you're browsing around, if you're there now checking things out, we display all reported sightings in the app on the map. So that's why you occasionally see dolphin sightings, for instance, in downtown DC, West Virginia, China, Australia. But these do not constitute our confirmed dolphin sightings. We felt like anyone can join and report dolphin sightings because they're so easy to distinguish. We didn't need an in-depth training program to get people to be able to report dolphin sightings. They're our most common marine mammal visitor in Chesapeake Bay, and the other marine mammals that we tend to see are either more elusive, like the harbor porpoise, or they're just as easy to distinguish, like seals and large whales. So, from over 4,000 sightings that we've received, these represent the confirmed ones in 2017, 2018, and 2019. And generally what we see is that as the waters warm, dolphins come into the bay in the spring. We see peak sightings in July, and then they kind of taper down until the fall. We haven't included 2020 results since the year hasn't wrapped up yet. but we have seen a similar pattern. This is a little moving map that we created, and this represents our sightings from 2018 alone, which was our biggest dolphin sighting year by far. So as the map goes through, you'll see lower bay sightings are in green, middle bay sightings are in orange, yellow, and upper bay sightings are the color purple. We loosely delineate these zones in the bay just for comfort and ease of discussion. We call lower bay anything from the mouth of the Atlantic Ocean up to the state line, so south of the Potomac and then kind of east-west. Middle bay goes from that state line up to the Chesapeake Bay Bridge near Annapolis, so Route 50, very easy to see on a map. And anything above or north of the bridge is an upper bay sighting.
Jamie, I don't think that if that was a video, it's not advanced.
Okay, I'm gonna play it. Sorry, I'm gonna play it now.
Okay.
As it plays through, I'll call out the months just because it does go pretty quick, so you can understand sort of the flushing pattern that we see up and down. April, May, June, July, August, September, October, and November. So you can kind of see they flush in and out. In addition to our citizen science on water sightings, the staff are working behind the scenes to deploy acoustic devices. So these are both the C-pods that you saw in the beginning, as well as hydrophones that can record any underwater sound. And we regularly have devices in the Potomac, Patuxent, the Road River, courtesy of our collaborators in Matt Ogburn's group at CERC. And our graduate student has a new device in Eastern Bay. And by having the detections in the water, helps us complement the data by understanding both sides of the picture, what's happening on the water and under the water. These acoustic detections show detection hours per day, so it's just a sum of how many hours dolphins were detected in the day. And this was lovely to see after a few years because it really complements our citizen science sightings on the water. We see the same seasonal pattern. And 2016 is the blue one. It cuts off because for our CPUDs, we only changed the device every 6 months, and the device died for unknown reasons. So that's why that data cuts off there. Okay, this is a spectrogram, and I just thought that people would be interested in hearing what dolphins sound like in Chesapeake Bay. So this is from Potomac River. I'm going to crank up the volume. Dolphin sounds give us an indication of what the dolphin are up to, and so they click, they echolocate, and they make a lot of noise. So that area of blue is where they're not making any noise, and the area of green is where they are clicking. In addition to our citizen science and our acoustic detections, we have graduate students working on other aspects and techniques of the research. So Amber is using signature whistle analysis to identify unique individuals where we can detect them. So signature whistles are unique to each individual. It's kind of like a name. They say their name over and over. They can repeat other signature whistles to call another member of their pod. So in this example, it was all I could do to get a sports reference in here. So this is it. Flipper dolphin on the left shows its signature whistle has this nice curve, but it's got a little plateau in it. It's very distinct from Dan Marino's dolphin's signature whistle, which has these nice steep curves. And they'll repeat these over and over, so that's why you see these series of 2. So Amber will continue to use signature whistle analysis in her study, but initially we've already identified hundreds of different signature whistles in the Potomac acoustic data that we have. And in 2019 alone, we did detect at least one individual in the Road River and in the Potomac River in that 1 year. So more interesting results to come from that. Our Sea Grant RU program, the research experience for undergraduate, brought us Lauren Rodriguez, who I believe is on the call today. She worked with Helen Bailey in the summer of 2019. And in that one short summer, she built a model using weekly dolphin sightings and environmental conditions. Her model was trained on data from June of 2017 to May of 2019, and then tested with data in later parts of 2019, and she found her model was able to predict relative weekly dolphin occurrence based on temperature, salinity, and tidal phase. That paper is currently in review, and luckily for us, generalized additive models did not scare Lauren away. She's now a master's student in Helen Bailey's lab, continuing her research with DolphinWatch data. And hopefully Lauren can answer your questions about generalized additive models if you have any, because I cannot. I heard on a call this week that no presentation these days is complete without mentioning the impacts on the project from COVID. So this is my slide. It's also a way for me to sneak in another graduate student's work. Initially, just looking preliminary numbers in July, when a lot of things had opened back up, we didn't see a huge impact to our citizen scientists being able to report dolphin sightings. We had about as many as in 2017 and more than in 2019. We also had less than 2018, which again was just a really big dolphin year for us. Our graduate student, Ben, is doing soundscape analysis in Chesapeake Bay. And like I said, he has a device in Eastern Bay. So he's hoping to do a pre-post-COVID soundscape analysis kind of before the boating closures, during the boating closures, and then after. But that work is still in progress. So I'm thankful to all of our users who always submit their sightings and images so generously, and the donors who keep us going. A lot of work happens on this project behind the scenes. I'm sure you all can imagine citizen science requires a lot of effort, and a lot of people volunteer their time for us, which is wonderful. Matt Ogburn and his collaborators at CERC help us with the gear deployment and retrieval for the device in the Road River. And Jezavante Foundation has been extremely generous with their donations, so we've really been relying on them. If you have any questions, this is our email address where you can reach Dr. Bailey or I for questions after the discussion.
Oh, thank you, Jamie. I have, the chat is full of questions, so I have a couple of specific ones to ask each of you, Liz and Jamie. And I'll start with those. And if anyone has questions, let me know in the chat box. And you don't have to type in the whole question. If you want, just tell me that you have one you'd like to ask in person. Let me just start, Jamie, since you just ended. Bill Dennison wants to know why 2018 was a particularly good year for dolphins.
I don't think I can answer that yet. I think we're still digging into the data. You know, we're looking at the environmental conditions. There could be a link there. Our graduate student, Lauren, who I mentioned, is hopefully going to be looking into some forage fish ecology and playing a role. So maybe someday we'll link, you know, what were the fish doing that year that made it particularly good. I can't answer that question right now, but I hope, Bill, that I will be able to soon, and I will definitely come to you first when we figure it out.
Okay, and I have another one from Meredith, who's asked a wonderful question. Does the more green area mean more dolphins or just a few dolphins being louder, faster? Which gives her an idea of having students create their signature whistle. I really like that.
I love that idea of students creating a signature whistle. The more green area means that there are clicks where I think both faster and louder. So they could have been closer to the device, the listening device. They also could have been just louder in general. So.
Liz, Meredith also had a question for you, a specific question. It is my understanding the CMC tracks mostly quantitative data. how do you include qualitative data or make sure that that data is also considered when telling a story?
Yeah, that's a great question, and one that we really struggle with, to be honest, within the CMC. We're very, as Meredith mentioned, we're very quantitative based, reporting numbers, tracking dissolved oxygen over time, tracking temperature over time, and we're really trying to kind of now circle back around and focus on the data interpretation piece. The hackathon really helped kind of start to tell narratives within different watersheds, linking this data to policies and other influential pieces as well. So it's something that we're definitely going to look forward to in the future, and hopefully the next round we'll be able to get a little bit more into the case studies and really telling the stories of stewardship. We have so many, that's another big thing, is we have so many just kind of off the cuff stories about how we've increased stewardship, but we haven't really been able to collect the data to say, you know, now we have this many more people who are learning about the Chesapeake Bay health, or, you know, a certain river health or something like that. So we definitely need to look into that in the future.
And I'll ask, I have some more specific questions, but I'll ask one. Meredith had a interesting question that involves you both. I wonder if the CMC data could overlap with dolphin sightings and show that dolphins tend to avoid poor water quality.
Yeah, we'll have to look into that and see if there's any correlations.
That sounds great. I'd love to dig into that.
Yeah, and Bill Dennison has followed up on that, is if you can figure out what leads to different dolphin abundances, and especially if abundance is water quality or fish abundance related, it would be great to include them into the Chesapeake Bay report card, which is a very interesting idea.
Yeah, being, you know, just 4 seasons in, I think we have a lot of directions that we can take our data, and I think that sounds like an exciting idea.
And it is connected. I'm interested because you have a absence of data kind of unique problem, Jamie. Larry Sanford is asking, can you tell whether lack of sightings in some areas is because of lack of dolphins or lack of observers?
We would rely on our acoustic detections more to tell us about lack of dolphins. Certainly, if you browse around our map, you can see less sightings on the eastern shore, less sightings on the lower eastern shore. There's just less people, less eyes, less people using the app there. And I think the only way to confirm that bias for sure would be to have some additional devices over in that area that we could learn from. But we do, when we use the citizen science data, we can use it. We can use our Google Analytics as like an effort bias. So like if we're just like mobbed with sightings and we get a ton of sightings versus like if the app is really quiet. So we can qualify our sightings data with other measures. That made sense.
I'm going to ask you both a question before I go back to some of the questions in the chat, because it came up during our pre-webinar conversation, and it was striking to me that you are always trying to operate in the tension between the fact that these citizen or these volunteer, I'm not going to stop calling it citizen data, but volunteer data or community data is not a zero cost effort. But you are also working in ways to make it as inclusive and open as possible. So for example, Jamie, you had to have an app, and Liz, you have to look at how you're engaging all different types of communities. And can you maybe each speak a little bit about that tension and how you kind of market the additional benefits beyond the data itself? There's obviously additional or co-benefits, right, to these efforts beyond the data that make it, you know, a worthwhile effort to attract, you know, additional funding or whatever. So can you maybe talk about what are those co-benefits are, and maybe a little bit about the difficulty of it's not, like Liz, I was struck by, you said half of your groups do not have any paid staff, which is really interesting, right? So you've got to make it easy for them, and that's not a zero cost effort. So both of you could maybe talk about how you market the additional co-benefits, and then what your challenges are to basically make it as inclusive as possible.
Sure, I'm happy to go first on this one. Yeah, as you mentioned, a lot of our groups don't have any paid staff whatsoever. So funding is always a huge issue. And also we really need the staff time in order to organize the volunteers. So the volunteers are great. They're submitting their time for the effort, but it still takes staff time to manage that, especially because we want to make sure the experience is good for all of the volunteers. They need somebody to ask questions to. They need somebody to help troubleshoot their equipment. All of those pieces take staff time to run. And I wish that I had the numbers right offhand, but Virginia DEQ actually did do a survey of the return on investment. So they have grant funding, and they put out $88,000 in grants every year to Virginia citizen-based volunteer monitoring programs. And the return on investment was astronomical. So I will try to put a link in the chat box to that result, because it really just shows the value and what you get in return for a pretty minimal investment in just staff time to manage volunteers, to coordinate a project, and to make sure that everything is running smoothly. You do get a pretty big return on investment on that. The one piece that we do still struggle with is kind of being very inclusive in our monitoring efforts. We try our very best to reduce the barriers to entry, and I think that's one thing where the CMC has really excelled over the last few years, is we've really tried to reduce the barriers to entry and increase that science literacy. So you don't necessarily need to have any science background in order to join our program, and really we'll educate you. We'll do all of the heavy lifting to get you to where you need to be. But we still haven't quite broken over that hurdle of reaching out to impacted communities or vulnerable communities, and really trying to work within those communities to collect the data needed to answer the questions about their local environment. And so that's really going to be our focus going forward, is how do we bridge the gaps. A lot of this has been very passive, and groups that are interested come to us. They kind of already have some type of interest in the environment and things like that. And so our next step is really just trying to be a little bit more proactive about reaching out to additional partners and making sure that all voices are being heard.
So, marketing the co-benefits isn't something that we've spent a ton of time focusing on with DolphinWatch. We feel like we have people kind of flooding in, and we get really good engagement and response from like our social media. We don't engage with all of our users directly, which has its pros and cons. We don't put a ton of effort into making our project very inclusive, but I think that we've seen it is inclusive because, for example, people will be just staying at a hotel or camping on the bay, and they will be able to report a dolphin sighting. So they can participate in whatever ways that they're able, however much or however as little as they're able. So I think that as our project grows, that could become a more targeted effort in terms of, I could see especially students and bringing in STEM education into our focus and, pulling people into this field, but that hasn't been something we've done yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and they're very different programs, I think that, and they're wonderfully different. I mean, I think, Liz, you're trying to get the connection to policymakers and managers, get the data used, but you're dealing with an unseen thing. Like you kind of have to educate to get people to do that. and Jamie has the, you know, the charismatic megafauna, right? But as a point of entry into getting interested to a different group of people. So they're very, very different in those senses. There was a specific question about dolphins from Richard Snyder. I remember a dolphin going up the Chester River in the 1960s all the way to Deep Landing. How much of the tidal freshwater areas are used by dolphins?
I don't know if I can answer that any better by just saying that you should go to the app and browse and look around, because you can see for yourself where the dolphin are reported. In some areas, they go further up into the freshwater than in others, and without acoustic devices in the water, I can't say whether that's because of our observers or what the dolphins are actually doing just yet.
Okay. Okay, we just got a question from Joshua Barnett. Do either of you involve volunteer scientists in the production of the public materials / communication initiatives that result from their data collection? It's a great question.
That is a great question. We offer data interpretation workshops. So UMSI, the University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science, is our partner that works on data interpretation. So that is really focused on taking the data that they collect and creating communication materials specifically for them that reach their target audience. The hackathon is really the first portion of the CMC where we've tried to take this data collection more as a whole and create some communication pieces. We haven't kind of reached that communication step. So we're not really at this point creating communications across all of the data collected within the CMC. It's still working with those individual groups right now.
Mm.
The first thing that came to mind when I heard that is that we were on the Outdoors Maryland program as a special, and our users took people out to look for dolphins and submitted their videos and their photographs. So, but in terms of other public materials and communication initiatives, I wouldn't say no, but we don't currently have any grant funding. We're kind of getting along on our donorship, and so we just haven't produced a lot of public materials or communication initiatives yet.
I'm surprised no one's asked you a question about your producing data, and Jamie, yours has been used in an academic context, and Liz, yours is being used in a policy context, right? And so you're kind of working with different data consumers, which is interesting. So I'm going to ask you, this might be a related question or not, and we've asked it of all our speakers. For each of you, what about the program keeps you up at night? What's your kind of big worry, or the thing that when you wake up at 3 a.m., you know, is on your mind in terms of a challenge or a concern?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the obvious answer is funding. Again, we're always trying to, this is, as we mentioned before, this isn't free monitoring. It still needs the support. And so we're always trying to look for diverse funding sources. We're very grateful to the Bay program for a large chunk of funding to run this program, but it doesn't meet all of the needs of the individual programs as well. So again, we're always balancing the needs of each individual monitoring program with the needs of the Bay program and the state agencies. So it gets us a lot of the way there, but you know, we're still always looking to find support for the individual monitoring groups as best we can. And then again, just trying to increase our reach and making sure that we're being as inclusive as possible and making sure that all people in the Chesapeake Bay watershed have a voice and can use this data to advocate for what they need for their communities. Making sure that we, you know, go in that direction is really, really important.
Do you have any ideas, Liz, but before we go to Jamie, about how you might get over that hurdle about becoming more engaged in vulnerable communities or making that connection?
Yeah, we've had a few ideas, and we're kind of working through some of the challenges. So again, the education piece is, and the getting the buy-in is really kind of that big first hurdle, is that we're not reaching communities who typically think about the environment or have kind of that baseline background. So that's really the first step, is building in that time to build the relationships and educate on how this data can be used, to really advocate for what they want to do. And then, of course, bridging the gap between the data that they need to collect and the data that we can actually provide them through our system. So we're definitely looking into kind of how we break down some of those barriers, some of those additional barriers that come up when working with those communities.
Thanks. Jamie, what keeps you up at night?
Definitely the funding, the source of funding. Like I said, we're relying on donations now. While we have a ton of interest, press, so many citizen scientists participating, we don't have a lot of donorship. And we're not sure, if people if we need to engage them in new ways in order to get them to fund it, or they don't think it's necessary. We're not sure what the barrier is there. New sources of grants, where else can we go? What else can we do? I think the second part is we're worried that by promoting interest in dolphins and watching marine mammals, that some people aren't tuned in to our education efforts, we could be promoting harassment. We don't want to promote harassment of the animals. We want to keep everything respectful and responsible. And so we're always, trying to balance those things, interest and respect. And we have talked about changing, what we call it, citizen science, using a more inclusive term. We haven't really done the research that we need to in order to understand what a better term would be for us to use within the bigger citizen science world.
That's interesting. I've recently been educated as to it's not inclusive to call it citizen science, right? Whether it's participatory science or democratization of science or some other term, but that's interesting. If I'm still watching the chat box for questions, but I think if I don't see anything else, I'm going to ask you the $1 million question, which is, if there's $1 million donor on the call, and you got a check, what is sort of the first priority? What would your next step be if funding was not an issue? If you weren't having to chase, or alter your objectives, right, for the funding source. But if someone just gave you this wonderful check, what would you do with it?
One big thing we would do is increase the functionality of the Data Explorer and really focus on the data visualization and telling those stories about the data that's being collected. In the initial round, we really chose to not focus on the data visualization piece and not really kind of interpret the data on there, but it's something that would be really helpful, again, to close the gap from start to finish and really start to and continue to tell the stories about what's happening and allow folks to interpret the data a little bit easier.
Bill Dennison just said if he had $1 million, he would love to support your citizen science efforts. So hoping Bill wins the lottery. Jamie, what would you do?
Thanks, Bill. A lot of people think that once you launch your app, it's free, and it's not, right? We have this app, and we've had an issue in the past where technology advances, and then we have to advance with it. So everyone has a cell phone, and they're sending us selfie pictures, and the mobile app is great, and then live pictures becomes a thing, and all of a sudden, our photos don't work. They crash the system because photos, videos, and now live images, this whole new category. So we need to keep funding up just with what we already have even. We would also fund our graduate students' eDNA work that's slated, because that's going to be expensive. We are going to have to do a little bit more training with our citizen scientists, a lot more coordination. There's going to be supplies and analysis in the labs, and We would also deploy more devices. We'd really spread out where we are, listening in the water for animals in areas where we're not sure people are actually looking for them. So yeah, I'll take Bill's money whenever he's ready to hand it over.
Okay. I have another question for Liz. Richard Snyder asked, for the water quality work, do you target underrepresented areas to expand citizen networks, or are you reliant on local interests contacting you? That's interesting.
Yeah, that's a great question. And right now we're pretty reliant on interested organizations or groups of folks contacting us. So again, that kind of leans us towards the bias of folks who already have an environmental interest, already have some environmental education and things like that. And so our focus really moving forward needs to be breaking down the other barriers into actually doing the outreach, finding a local champion within these underserved communities that can really help us bridge those gaps. One area where we're looking to expand is working with HBCUs. So this year we actually started a program with Bowie State University in Maryland, and we think that that's a model that we can definitely expand to start building in that interest a little bit earlier before reaching the broader community and stuff like that, starting in college, getting folks interested, and then as they move on and expand into the community, you know, we can have champions in different communities as well. So that's one model that we're looking into, and then we'll continue. Any advice that people have? I went to the other environmental justice panels that you all hosted earlier this year, and they were fantastic. And I'm always interested in any other lessons learned or pieces that we can definitely employ when working with those communities.
So that's a great segue to the last question I'll ask each of you, which is from your platforms as panelists. What would you like? There's a wonderful diversity of people on this call, from academic institutions, NGOs, regulatory agencies, whatever. Here's an opportunity to make an ask. And so I'd asked what each of you would like to ask for from this community. What could we help you with?
I mean, I think our big ask is the data use piece. If you know, we have this expansive data set. If you all have projects that you're looking into, questions that you want answered, we're always looking for those research opportunities, how we can connect. I think there's a big potential to work with universities and graduate students and integrating this network of data into graduate work and theses and all of those pieces. So really, yeah, just understanding that there's this big data source out there, and if you want to connect to it, I'm more than happy to have additional conversations about it.
Great.
I think my ask would be slightly into the future. We hope to engage with lots of other organizations and groups that are already studying, both to help with acoustic device deployment, retrieval, change out, because, you know, we're in Solomon, so getting over to like the other side of the bay is costly and time consuming. We also hope to engage with like river keepers or someone else to spearhead some of our future volunteer efforts. We're not quite there yet. We're not doing it now, but at some point there will be a call from DolphinWatch to the broader audience for help and participation on water samples and things like that.
Wow. Well, I want to thank you both, because your presentations, believe me, were a gift in the season of giving. And so a big round of applause for our panelists. Please join us in January for our next CRC Roundtable. In the meantime, happy holidays, and please, everyone, stay safe and healthy. Thank you.